When it comes to DC film news, 2021 already has absolutely no chill whatsoever because Walter Hamada gave an interview to the New York Times, and from that interview, so much stuff has spun out. So Hannah and I had to get back together and break down everything that came out of this bombshell interview regarding Walter Hamada, the Snyderverse, and DC films moving forward. Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing editor here at CinemaBlend. We are officially in the year of Zack Snyder's Justice League. The cut is coming to HBO Max and maybe theaters in March. Hopefully we will hear a release date. There's been one that's been floating around. Hannah, did you see the release date that potentially got leaked?
I did see that. Yeah, do you think that's true, or do you think that was just a mistake?
Hold on, let me see, because, and I don't even want to mention it here, like, the people in the movement are kind of saying, like, don't be the one to reveal it. Like, let Zack be the one to reveal it. And so I won't say what the date is, in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. I don't know if I believe that date, because without telling you what the date is, it's a Saturday, which is an odd day of all things. Like, Friday would make sense for a movie and Sunday would make sense for an HBO Max show. So a Saturday seems unusual, but I'm waiting until yeah, right, yeah. So I'm waiting to get either confirmation from HBO Max or for Zack to reveal it itself. But anyway, welcome to 2021, everybody. We are continuing our Snyderverse and Zack Snyder's Justice League and Release the Snyder Cut and all these other things you want to call it video series as we dive into 2021. As we begin the series this year, we absolutely have to start with the Walter Hamada New York Times interview and all the fallout that came from it. So Hannah,
yes.
First off, say hello, and then tell us where we're going from there.
Okay, so we have basically like three main clusters of stuff that we're going to get into. The first one is obviously the whole Cul-de-sac comment and the future of the Snyderverse. So we'll deep dive into that and kind of give you guys what you should take away from that report. And then we're going to talk about Ray Fisher's future as Cyborg and his response to the Hamada article. And then we're going to talk about all of that very frustrating Batman word twisting, rumor, crazy ugliness that happened mainly on Twitter, I think, but also some mainstream outlets kind of picked some stuff up and ran with some stuff that maybe wasn't necessarily true. So we'll dive into that as well. But so let's start with the cul-de-sac comment. And for those who, I mean, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've seen this already, but for those who haven't, I'll go ahead and read what the report said in the New York Times. And it said, at least for now, Mr. Snyder is not part of the new DC film's blueprint, with studio executives describing his HBO Max project as a storytelling cul-de-sac, a street that leads nowhere.
Somebody coined the phrase Cul-de-Zack, which I think is hysterical. I don't know who said that on social media. I know I saw it on Twitter someplace. Whoever said that, that was fantastic. The takeaway from there is that unnamed studio executives,
what does that mean, Sean?
It means that the writer, the author of this piece, Brooks Barnes, who has written both pro and anti-Snyder things over time, and he's reporting from sources that he's being told. These are sources that have been wrong before. This is not Walter Hamada. A lot of heat blew back at Walter Hamada for the cul-de-sac statement. This is not Walter Hamada.
Well, so I saw it on Twitter first, and I thought Hamada said those things, and then I actually read the article, and I was like, wait a second.
Wait, you actually read the article?
I know it's crazy, but I went past the headline.
I don't recognize this well.
This is what happened. Everybody jumped to the conclusion that the official stance of DC Films was that this is a cul-de-sac. Not the case. This was not attributed to Hamada. It's attributed to sources that people were saying to the New York Times. Now, that could be anybody. It could be anyone who's frustrated.
It could
just
include Hamada, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yes, it could. But in a piece that's quoting Hamada repeatedly,
right.
If Walter Hamada said anything along the lines of, no, this is a one and done, we have no plans to continue, I think that they would have.
I don't think the New York Times would have been like, yeah, no, we won't quote your name in that. That's fine.
So because for this reason, that is a very short-sighted approach. And so many people came out after the fact to point out that this is a very short-sighted approach because the show hasn't played yet.
And also the sentence starts with "at least for now."
Yes, exactly. So Kevin Smith was one of the first ones to come out and say on his Fat Man Beyond podcast, why would they say that? Like, this hasn't played yet. And the example that I would use is Wonder Woman 1984. Like, 2 days after that thing set records for HBO Max, they were like, oh yeah, Patty and Gal are coming back for part 3. 100%.
And you had talked to Patty like earlier before that, a couple weeks prior to Wonder Woman 1984 dropping, and she was acting like there were no immediate plans before.
No, and not only that, like, first off, they don't tip off their hands to that kind of thing because there's a ton of negotiations going on behind the scenes, and quite often it's who has the advantage. If your movie bombs, then the studio has the advantage, and the studio could say, no, we're not going to go forward. But when your film does really well, then you have the leverage to say, this is what I want to do, and this is how we're going to do it going forward. We have been saying all along that Zack has story that he wants to tell. If the movie does well, if the show does well, if the Snyder Cut does well on HBO Max, he will have a lot of leverage over the streaming service to say, this is what we're going to do. And it could happen as quickly as the Wonder Woman 3 greenlight did, which, again, 2 days. It took 2 days for Warner Brothers to turn around and say, why not more? And we're going to wait for Patty, who is moving on to Rogue Squadron for Disney, and they're willing to wait for her to come back. So I find all that to be really fascinating, and the idea of calling it a cul-de-sac seems really silly. So then Zack showed up on the Comic Book Debate podcast. The Faruqi brothers did an amazing job of interviewing him, and he played it coy. You know, they said, like, what are your plans for the future? And he kind of just said, like, hey, man, who knows, you know, that kind of thing. And that's
how the business works.
Of course, that's how the business works. So no one's going to come out and boldly state one way or the other. They're going to wait till it screens, and they're going to see how it does.
Yeah. At the end of the day, business is business. And if it does really well and it's good for the streaming service, I have a hard time believing they wouldn't want to continue that.
I like the way you think. Go on.
I also fault DC and Warner Brothers for frequently putting the cart before the horse, more often than not.
Do they just talk too much? Like, what? I'm trying to understand how this keeps happening.
I'm trying to figure out if they do it to maintain buzz and a heat on their DC projects, which I don't think they need to do. I think those projects are going to generate heat regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they would just kind of stop letting people know what their development plans are, because then people get upset when those things don't happen. So if this is one of those instances where, like, any rational studio, you would be like, well, we're just going to wait and see. Like, if the audience wants it, we'll deliver more. But the new method is we're going to promise, you know, the next few projects.
There's something in the works, and it's no scheme.
And Warner Brothers isn't the only studio that's guilty of this. Like,
Marvel.
We just watched Star Wars and Marvel roll out 10 titles per, you know? Like,
but I will say, I feel like Star Wars and Marvel have, like, a good enough track record where you could, like, genuinely believe, like, yeah, these things likely will not bomb, and if they do, that's going to be a shock. But DC has the most tumultuous history, I think, that we've seen when it comes to this sort of, like, world building of just, like, changing their minds, and they think something's going to work, and then it doesn't work, and then what they don't think is going to work works, and it's just like...
For sure. But my biggest takeaway from the Hamada interview, for that one specifically, the New York Times interview part of it, was that it felt so much like the lessons from 2016 and 2017 of them pre-announcing stuff and over-promising stuff, which they did back in that time frame, and it tanked the experiment largely because, you know, the filmmakers couldn't live up to the expectations, or they put too much hype into these projects and they didn't come to be. It feels like they're doing it all over again. It feels like they're like, every new project that comes down the pipeline is going to have an HBO Max component to it.
And all the rumors about, like, who's getting what spinoff or what movie, like, all that stuff's going to be a hot mess.
Yeah,
it already
it's like,
is.
guys, let the fans respond to something before you tell them that like, great. Okay, so I'll use the Suicide Squad film as an example. Like, they do this movie with James Gunn. The studio, by everything that you've heard, really liked it. It went really well. James Gunn had a good time doing it. Then they went to him and said, hey, if there's another character from this show that you would want to continue telling stories with, who would you choose? So he mentions Peacemaker. So now they're in Vancouver shooting it. That at least has this filmmaker had an idea, and
they already shot the movie. Like, they already shot the Suicide Squad, so there's some sort of proof where you can go look at that footage and be like, yeah, this will work. As opposed to like something like Aquaman 2, which has not even begun production.
But what they
yet.
don't have yet is they don't know if the fans like this character.
True. Yeah.
You know, like, it'd almost be like coming out of David Ayer's Suicide Squad and being like, get me Jai Courtney for 10 episodes of a Captain Boomerang, you know, a series.
Yeah.
What if Suicide Squad, the movie, plays and everyone's like, ew, that John Cena character was a disaster.
I think people love John Cena too much. But yes, your larger point is completely correct. It's
psychotic.
It's a lot of cart before the horse.
Yes. So let's move on to Ray Fisher. After the Hamada article was posted, he tweeted out, Walter Hamada is the most dangerous kind of enabler. His lies and WB/PR's failed September 4th hit piece sought to undermine the very real issues of the Justice League investigation. I will not participate in any production associated with him. Accountability over entertainment. And then he followed that up with a tweet.
Stop! Please, stop!
This latest tweet was right after. So Walter Hamada just signed a contract agreement.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah, he signs an extension that's going to keep him in place as the president of DC Films through 2023.
Yes.
And just to give that a little context, like, a lot of people were saying, oh, if Ray Fisher says he's not going to work on any project that's associated with Walter Hamada, then one or the two has to go. You know, it almost felt like a line drawn in the sand. And people who were sort of looking at it from the outside in, again, I don't know any sort of specifics about this, but I'm just sort of judging it as somebody who's seeing it sort of play out from the outside. It's almost like Ray is saying, well, if he's going to be in place as the head of DC Films, then I'm not going to be part of any films that he's associated with. I don't know if that includes HBO Max as well, too. But he seemed to draw a line in the sand. So then the studio comes out and they extend Hamada's deal through 2023, which
everyone on Twitter loved. The end.
Yeah, that one over. Yeah, right. Everyone was super happy, and in the end. That to me is the studio saying, well, okay, we're going to go ahead with our guy. In which case, then Ray then responded with this follow-up.
He said, it's weird how these reactionary announcements from WB Pictures always forget to mention that Walter Hamada was working directly with Geoff Johns and Toby Emmerich on Shazam during Justice League reshoots. More soon. Accountability over entertainment.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a hard story to comment on in this instance because we just don't have all the facts. You know, there's so many things that have gone on the reshoot shots that Ray is very privy to, that other people at Warner Brothers are very privy to. For a while, when Ray was going after people to get accountability and to push this internal investigation forward, the names that he was singling out were Joss Whedon, Geoff Johns, and John Berg. Those are the three in particular. The Hamada hit piece is when Hamada kind of came out and said back in September, when the investigation was ongoing, that he wasn't part of Justice League and he wasn't overseeing the reshoots because that stuff happened before he came on board. And I believe that's still correct. I think the timeline of that is still correct. But now Ray is trying to say that Hamada knew all the stuff that was going on and was involved in Shazam and some of these other projects that were post-Justice League and happening. It's a very sticky situation. Now, even right before we started recording, Hannah, I guess Ray was on Twitch. He does these live Twitch streams where he's saying, hey, there's a ton of press that's going around sort of dismissing my future as Cyborg. And you know, let's not say that that's going to happen just yet. You know, like, you guys don't know the whole story. Which is fine. That's very fair to say that we don't know the whole story, but one of the only people who can tell us the whole story is Ray Fisher. And I really did believe that after the investigation concluded that he would come out, you know, and reveal more of his side of the story. And he very well may, but it hasn't happened yet. So until we know more details, it's hard.
And one thing I wanted to mention too, didn't Ray Fisher say that Hamada was willing to kind of throw Joss Whedon under the bus to like be like, will you like kind of forgive Geoff Johns a little bit and like let's go after Joss? And Ray was like, no.
Yeah, it's a very complicated relationship that they seem to have.
Yeah. So let's talk about Ray Fisher's future as Cyborg. So we'll talk about HBO Max in a second, but to me, it seems like the major takeaway is that while he may apparently have been in talks to appear in the Flash movie, that's probably not happening.
it'd be easier for them to not have Cyborg in as a character, because I'm not even quite sure what his role would have been in it if you could sort of rewrite it. Like, I think about Captain America Civil War as an example. The screenwriters, the two screenwriters of that, had multiple drafts of that going forward, whether they were going to be able to get Tom Holland to play Spider-Man or not. And they literally didn't know until like weeks before they shot the airport scene of whether they were going to have Spider-Man as a possibility. So you can make changes right up until the very last minute about how they're going to include him. But I don't think Cyborg's going to be in that movie, personally.
I agree.
So do you think there's some world that could exist where if HBO Max decides, let's go forward with all these different Snyderverse projects, that Ray Fisher could return? And again, all of this stuff is hypothetical, depending on how Zack Snyder's Justice League actually performs, but...
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the gray area that Ray is dancing in right now, where, you know, if you look at his tweet and he says, I'm not going to work on anything that Hamada is part of, if Hamada is not part of HBO Max because they have a different organizational structure, and if Ray is coming out on Twitch and saying, like, hey, my future Cyborg might not be as done as people are saying it is, he might know that there's a flexibility to still play Cyborg on HBO Max and have it not be under Hamada's umbrella. That seems like a tightrope walk between wording, but if you pay attention to the way that his tweets are worded, that might be the case. I don't know specifically whether Walter Hamada, as the president of DC Films, oversees the decisions that are being made on the HBO Max side. When these streaming services get rolled into the situations, the who is calling the shots questions get very murky.
Yes.
And I don't know. So yes, I guess there is a
So not
a
all hope is
possibility.
lost. We'll just say that.
Right. Yeah. If you love Ray as Cyborg, that's where I think you would end up seeing it.
So we will not be those people that are saying that he's completely done with Cyborg. We will leave that door open.
I mean, like these rumors just catch fire.
Snowball.
They just go, and people don't know. It's okay. It's okay, guys,
to not
every
know.
once in a while to say you don't know. Like that, we don't have to have a hard and fast yes or no take every single time.
Yes.
No.
I don't know.
I don't care. I don't care.
So we're actually gonna cut this video a little bit short and do a part 2, which will be dropping in a little bit. While you wait though, be sure to let us know your thoughts on what we've talked about so far in the comments below, and hit like and subscribe so you don't miss all of our Release the Snyder Cut videos.